I am thrilled to introduce a couple guys who are here with a film called As We Speak. It's in the U.S. documentary competition this year, and it's having its world premiere tomorrow. I'd like to bring out the film's director, J.M. Harper. J.M., you want to come on out? J.M. Harper is a writer-director from Brooklyn. As We Speak is his first feature as a director. He's a documentarian, a writer-director, as I said. He's edited 4 features, including the Emmy-nominated Jeen-yuhs, a Kanye Trilogy, which was on Netflix. He's also a commercial director at Park Pictures and has accrued awards at Cannes, Clios, Adweek, and beyond. J.M. Harper.
Thank you.
Okay, and next we have Kemba. Kemba, come on out, Kemba. I got a few words to say about you. Kemba is a rapper from Hunts Point in the Bronx, formerly known as YC the Cynic. Early on, he was called one of the top 5 underground hip-hop artists in New York by Deli Magazine. I used to love Deli Mag, coming from New York myself. He released critically acclaimed music throughout the 2010s and then started getting noticed. In 2016, Kendrick Lamar invited him on stage in Brooklyn to rap, and the concert was live streamed on Facebook. I'm sure that turned a lot of heads and got people talking about you. In 2019, he was featured on the final posthumous album of the late Florida rapper XXXTentacion. In 2020, he released his major label debut called Gilda, named in tribute to Kemba's mother, who passed away 2 years prior. And this is not Kemba's first appearance in a Sundance film. He played himself in the great Sundance 2020 film, The 40-Year-Old Version, spelled Version, which was directed by Rada Blank, and who won the U.S. Dramatic Competition in Directing Award that year. So when Kemba plays himself in Sundance films, good things happen. So I'd like to start off this conversation with sort of a wide-angle view on hip-hop. Last year, the world celebrated hip-hop's 50th birthday. Why is this art form so enduring and it's constantly evolving? Why does it have such staying power, and why does it continue to be relevant and such a force in our culture? Let me start with you.
As well as Kimba's the appropriate one to answer that first, but I will say, in the context of what we're doing for the last 50 years, we've seen hip-hop rise from what was a lot of rubble in the Bronx to become perhaps the dominating musical force on the planet. You can't walk outside on that street and not hear it going from one building to another. And so, yeah, it's been a phenomenal journey for the music, which makes it all the more fascinating and dark and worth looking into the point that we are at now, and how the music is being used in the court system, but not to get ahead of ourselves.
Okay, so Kemba, I mean, obviously hip-hop is in your blood, it's part of your life. Why do you think that it is such a powerful force in our culture?
First, can I say hi, guys? How are you? I felt weird not saying hi.
Yeah.
And I think hip hop really started out being a way for black and brown people to sort of express themselves and have a good time, and I feel like people were drawn to that. But it quickly became just like a way to broadcast what it's like in communities that really had no other sort of representation, or the most of the world would not know what would be happening in these hoods everywhere. Right. And I think that's what made it a global powerhouse and a sort of form an emotional connection with people. Right. Is because it was really the real experiences that people were happening that they were not seeing in the mainstream. And what they were seeing on the news was like a sort of cartoonish, negative view of it. Right. And hip hop was saying, That's what they're showing, but these it was actually humanizing those exact people.
Right.
That I feel like globally, a lot of those conditions are similar, and so it just became a worldwide phenomenon.
So let's zoom in on your own personal experience. Maybe give us a little backstory on how you got into hip hop, how you started writing and expressing yourself as an artist. When did it first sort of capture your imagination and your purpose?
Well, it all started when I was 9 years old. No, I was in love with hip hop as a kid. I'm from the Bronx. It was everywhere. I was literally 9 years old rapping. My older brother was doing it, and he had a bunch of CDs, and his was in a pile with Eminem and all of these other Jay-Z. And me at that age, I couldn't tell the difference. So what he was doing was the coolest thing in the world. And I started writing then, and I literally never turned back. It became something that was a way for me to connect with people quickly and in a way where I could express my true self. Right. And that's still what it is for me today. I'm not great at doing this, right, but I can express my ideas through song, and so it's really important to me.
How about you, JM? How did you, first get involved in really getting your head into and your heart into what hip hop stood?
My brothers and I have played music since a very early age. Like my older brother's a drummer, so playing on pots and pans, and I picked up a guitar early, my brother on the bass, and so music was a huge part of our lives ever since we were kids. And growing up in the 90s was a focal point for hip hop really coming into its own, and it was always the coolest thing. The environment that I grew up in musically was also very diverse, so it wasn't like hip hop was the only thing we were listening to. Mm-hmm. And I think eventually that kind of opened up my world to the beauty of the music in contrast with these other worlds of music that I knew, and the difference in the depth and the way that the language was used was radically different than anything else. So although hip hop wasn't the only thing that I was listening to, and it wasn't the only music that communicated to me, it did always stand out as black music. Like that is how predominantly black people chose to talk to each other and to talk to the world. And then, these days we've seen that music cross-pollinating with every other genre in ways that are super progressive. But hip-hop to me was a form of music amongst a huge palette of other musics. And I think that comes across in the film in the sense that you could trace hip-hop all the way back to the origin story of black people in America, and that to watch that in the film, that journey from the first songs that slaves were singing on the Middle Passage, and you have these Dutch slavers who were writing in their journals that you can go read from the 1670s, saying we can hear the slaves singing and we know they're communicating to each other, but we don't understand what they're saying. And from that point in 1670, it was a form of protest, of communication, of hope-making, and to trace that from there to Negro spirituals and slave songs, to rhythm and blues, to jazz, to rock and roll, to soul music, right up to hip-hop. It's something that an understanding of the totality of American music was something that I was interested in.
So As We Speak is your first feature film as a director. It's a very provocative topic. Maybe tell us a little bit about when the idea first originated and when you decided this is what I want to do. This is what I want to focus on.
I was just coming off of the Kanye West doc, Cutting That, which was, as you might imagine, a very intense experience. And so I wasn't looking to do another music documentary. And so there's a book that was brought to me by producer Sam Bisbee at Park Pictures. And I told him, he was like, you should read this book and have a conversation with these producers, Sam Widows and Pete Camber. And I told him I wasn't interested. And thanks, but no thanks. And here we are. So Bisbee said, no, just read the book and have a conversation with them. And fortunately, he persisted, and I did. And immediately, after reading the first chapter, I knew, okay, I can do something with this, and I want to make this into a film.
Cool. And maybe Kemba, maybe you could sort of give the pitch as to what As We Speak actually is about. Like, what if someone says, "What's this film about?" Like, it kind of touches on a lot of different sides of it.
The elevator pitch. As We Speak is about the story of the criminalization of black art and black voices through the lens or from the starting point of hip-hop and tracing it back, as Jason said, throughout the sort of history of black people in America.
And how did you two intersect? Like, how did you get to know Kemba, and like, how did you happen to sort of come together to make this film?
So Jason and I first met. I was a part of this program called We the Culture. It was a meta Black Creators program. And so for a year straight, I was sort of producing content. I hate the word content, but content, I guess. And which really pushed me to sort of figure out my own visual identity and the story that I wanted to tell. And then at the end of that, they chose 4 of us out of like 100 or so to do this like little short biography documentary sort of thing. And Jason was the director, and there was just a chemistry from there.
Awesome. So your approach to telling this story or exploring this topic, you use a lot of different sort of methods. There's animation, there's recreation. At what point in the process did you decide, I need to sort of like create a few different ways of expressing what I'm trying to say here?
That's what hip-hop does. And so it was important to me to make the film like a song and to do it in a way that blended fact, fiction, fantasy, hopes, dreams. It had to reach back and draw connections between things that you think are totally opposite or even in opposition to each other. That's what hip-hop does. And so the film needed to do, someone once described poetry as the connection of 2 disparate things that you think are opposite, and poetry is the connection you draw between the 2. So I see the film as kind of a poem in that way. What does Shakespeare have to do with hip-hop? Like, the film explores that and actually shows that there's a very intimate relationship between what rap artists like Kemba or in that case, artists in Chicago are doing and what Shakespeare was doing in 1595. So making those connections was not just important because we didn't want to make like a talking head film. It was important because we wanted to, when you watch the film, you become complicit in the issue in multiple ways.
So for those people who may not be aware of this growing trend of the criminalization of rap lyrics, maybe you could just explain a little bit about how this is happening and to what degree and why it sort of like needs to be sort of, made, people need to be made aware of this.
So some of you might have heard of a rapper named Young Thug who's on trial right now in Atlanta. And recently, as in like within the last month, the judge ruled that the prosecution and the DA could use a great number of their rap lyrics as evidence against them. And so they're taking the music that's made in a certain artistic vacuum artistic expression, things that you write in notebooks or on your phone, in the context of art, same way that you see Johnny Cash doing it, same way you see Queen do it, same way you see any number of heavy metal or you name the genre. And prosecutors are taking that and they're saying, this isn't artistic expression, actually this is autobiography, and actually this is evidence of crime. And that's happening in U.S. courts now with Young Thug, obviously, but more importantly, it's been happening for the last 30 years with hundreds of documented cases that we know of. And in short, when a rap artist or when just a person who has written rap lyrics, doesn't matter if they even consider themselves an artist, when they enter into a courtroom, there's an entire system against them. There's a criminal court case is the most expensive case that you can possibly enter into. And once you sit into that defendant's seat, you've probably got a public defender who is basically like a glorified social worker who's maybe met you a few minutes before your case starts. They tell you what your odds are, which are terrible at the case going your way, because you have a jury who we show in the documentary empirically is going to look at you the way that you might look at somebody who's been pulled over on the side of the street by a cop. You look at them and say, what did they do wrong that they deserve to be here? That's exactly how a jury looks at somebody in the defendant's seat. So you've got a jury that's against you, you've got a public defender that barely knows you, you've got a judge that likely doesn't look like you, doesn't know your world, probably has not listened to hip-hop and for entertainment. Right. And you've got a prosecutor who's going to take the lyrics and say, this thing that Kemba said in this very popular song that your kids are dancing to, this is actually an autobiography and it's evidence of crime. And so that's what's happening, and has been happening for 30 years. And it's risen to the level now of this very famous case, but it's really about the hundreds and thousands of other cases where they didn't have $5 million to pay a private attorney that we're interested in talking about and letting the world know what's been happening.
And, oh, that was loud. And even worse than this is evidence of you committing a crime, a lot of the times the way they use it is this is evidence that this is the type of person that would commit a crime.
Right.
You know,
right.
It's sick.
So the topic of this film is, you know, you've not only had an artistic career, but you've also kind of lent your energy and your time to sort of, you know, helping those who need a little bit, you know, a lift up in the world. You want to talk a little bit about why this sort of like spoke to you and why this was sort of a perfect collaboration for you at this point in your career?
Sure. When Jason came to me with the idea, it felt like such a culmination of all my life's experiences. I grew up and just sort of like immersed in a world of activism. I co-founded, at 17, I co-founded a community organization called Rebel Diaz Arts Collective, a political group from Chicago. They were like my older brothers, took me around the world, showed me sort of like the context of how people lived in Venezuela. We went to different communities, and when Freddie Gray was murdered, we went to Baltimore. When Mike Brown was murdered, we went to Ferguson and spoke to his family, and so it really just shaped who I am and the art that I make, and so when Jason told me about this, it was like a no-brainer.
Cool. So you were able to get some other members of the hip-hop community involved in the film. Killer Mike is involved. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you got him into the mix?
Yeah, he's been an advocate and concerned with this issue for a long time. And so Mike has a huge voice, and with a name like Killer Mike, especially, right. You can imagine that someone like him has a perspective on this sort of issue. So he came on board, but it was really, again, like the film, when you're making a film, like you start out trying to do one thing. You make 3 films when you make a film. There's a film you set out to make, you script. There's the film that you actually make when you're shooting it on the ground, and then there's the film that you make when you're cutting it. So as we were getting into the second version of the film, which was what was actually happening on the ground, as we were talking to a lot of massive artists, some of which Kemba's had crossovers with in the past, the film was trying to tell us that actually the people, the voices that will matter most in this film are the ones with the biggest targets on their back, the ones who are most vulnerable. And they were the ones who were most open and most ready to share their stories and how they had in their interactions with the criminal justice system and when their lyrics had been used against them in New York, Chicago, Atlanta, Houston, Louisiana, LA, London, all these places, the same thing was happening. And pulling all that together into a single story was what the film wanted to be. So that's how we pursued it.
Kemba, one of the major sort of through lines in the history of hip-hop is collaboration with fellow artists. You know, fellow rappers are always like guesting on each other's tracks. What do you think that does? What does that bring to the table in terms of the art to have that sort of like creative collaboration between other rappers, you know, joining forces and kind of like helping each other out and giving each other like exposure like you've had?
Yeah, I think artists collaborating, it does a lot of things. It opens, if I collaborate with Jason, it'll open him up to the people that listen to my music and vice versa. But it also pushes each other creatively to sort of step out of our comfort zones and maybe create something that we wouldn't have created on our own, you know?
Right. So Sundance, you know, it's a celebration of filmmaking. It's a celebration of collaboration, like we're talking about. You know, it takes a lot to get a film here and to have this moment. Jason, maybe talk a little bit about just what it feels like to have gone through the process of this very complicated process and creative journey that you were on to finally be here with a finished film and to have it be in competition and have its world premiere tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a good question. I have to say, like, there were certain points when we were making the film. We had a tremendous production team. We had a lot of belief, which was just like Kemba was saying this morning. There's a lot of times where people just like, just trust Jason, like if you can. That you know, if we were trying to have a bunch of rappers in Chicago do Shakespeare, that is going to work out, and not just that it's going to work out, but that it's going to add to the conversation, or that actually in the hip hop documentary we need to go film a gospel choir and show how the music connects. There were a lot of times where again, the film kind of told us what we wanted to do, and ideas would just spontaneously come up, and our tremendously supportive production team was just there to make it happen. And so in the end, yeah, submitting to Sundance, you never know. I've been on the other side plenty of times, been rejected at Sundance, and so it's not really a referendum on how good you are. It's just a whole nexus of things. So being able to get in and have a platform like this is incomparable, and we're very fortunate to be here. And we're just kind of learning the process. It's both of our first times here in person, and so we're elated to be in this community of artists. And we can't wait for people to actually see the damn thing, which is tomorrow, and to see what happens as a result.
Well, cool. Well, congratulations again. We can conclude our conversation here, but we have a little special treat from Kemba. So without further ado, maybe you and I could leave the stage and let Kemba share a little of his music with you.
Here we go.
So I wrote a piece that you'll hear when you see the film. It's sort of like a culmination of the things that I've learned. This is so cool. I didn't know I was going to have the sign language translator. Oh, my goodness, I'm very happy. Okay, so it goes like this. When I wrote this, there wasn't no studio audience. No one applauding it, movie recording it. Just a devil on one shoulder, angel on one shoulder arguing. One saying, keep it calm. The other saying, now go in. Been building a bunch of bridges under two conditions. When you talk, I listen. When I talk, you listen. But some people still won't get it. Maybe they lack senses, lack of empathy, lack of interest, lack of experience with the blacks. Maybe the accents leave them apprehensive. Might have to flip from Queen's Flip to the Queen's English for these academics. Okay, then. Let's get it. Y'all with me? They never cared to make amends. They rather make amendments. Used to auction off the niggas. Now they profit off of prisons. Those incentives shape environments. Those environments make conditions. Those conditions shape the culture. Then they focus on the symptoms. Make a profit off, make a mockery of, then lock you up for lyrics. You get it? Because I ain't about to say no specifics. Because nowadays, you can say what happened, but we don't know who did it. Or they gonna pop up at your door like they Jehovah's Witness. Judge spell out the sentence like you ain't grown those business. They want what's in you without you. Want our rhythm, not our blues. Took the spirit out the soul. Now it feel like deja vu. Took the pulse out the flows. Now it's giving Dr. Seuss. If you see a nigga jumping out the gym, it's not the shoes. The news get you caught up in the angles. The rich and famous. Confessions in a hidden language. The image gangster. I see the dark skin contrasting off different pavements. Lives tangle with the forces like two distant strangers. The color band-aids they ain't bother making until it made sense. So when the chalk hit the asphalt and his rhymes and his rap for, so Fox say it's rap fault, you got what you asked for. Where they get the experts on them lyrics? The task force? How badly you think they want to win it? The task force. As we speak, they piecing meaning on the newest song, clapping on the 1 and 3, 9 on the 2 and 4. We could see the undercovers peeking through the door, uniform, John Cena, like I ain't never seen you before. In New York, the undercover cops look like John Cena, the wrestler. It's very strange. It's like, obviously, you're an undercover cop right there. Not you. I was just... As we speak, they tune in laws like a blues guitar. Just change the evidence, and they gonna say it's a new song. Just like our medicine, they never address the root cause. Just reap the rewards and snip the strange fruit off. I know they gonna do their worst as we speak. Thoughts blurred, like I said the 7 words, FCC. But if any of my words spark a nerve, irk a nerve, work your nerves, make you nervous, then it's working as we speak. Thank you.